Hi, wonderful people. Before I kick off with my monologue, just a reminder, check out the patreon.com site. You're probably sick of hearing me say it, but it's important. By joining up there, you support the channel. Simple. Plus, you get early access to all my new content, and you get exclusive access to a question and answer session every week. It's great. I enjoy it thoroughly. So come and make it even better. Okay, now it's my thought for the week. The ridiculousness of the situation in which we find ourselves, it begs laughter. And so I was thinking about that and noting that I keep forgetting to laugh. I know I come across as serious on here all the time. That old line about it being no challenge to tell the difference between a Scotsman and a ray of sunshine. That one. And that is how I come across, and I know it. And a lot of the time it troubles me because people who know me in private life, I'm actually quite I'm ready to laugh most of the time. I like a bit of chat, a bit of a bit of competitive banter, and I'm aware of the absence of laughter on my part. But the truth is that while the situation in which we find ourselves, it reeks of all sorts of danger. Of course it does. Danger to freedom, danger to our rights, danger to life itself. It's important to remember, I tell myself, that some of it is simply laughable as well, in that the enemy ranged against us is so, I don't know, they're out there where the buses don't run. And it's laughable. It's ridiculous. I think those are some of the right words to describe them. How can we look at what they're all about nowadays, being the enemy, and not laugh at them, at least some of the time? It also takes itself incredibly seriously, the enemy, which is laughable too. Or it could be, and it should be, the Davos prima donnas, the Bond villains, Schwab and the like, the would-be world dictators of the World Health Organization, the blatant totalitarian intentions of the United Nations. They are ludicrous in their pomposity, in the way they radiate something akin to divine right to rule, as though they're cast in the same mould as the emperors of old. I was watching the testimony from US Secret Service Director Kim Cheetle in front of the House Oversight Committee in the aftermath of the Donald Trump shooting at the rally in Pennsylvania. And she was ridiculous. There's almost no other word for it. Well, maybe pathetic, right enough. Given her position and given what all she had to say in the face of it. But her testimony was a laughable joke. At one point, she was asked if she'd handed over all the audio and video recordings related to the shooting of Donald Trump. And in reply, she said she'd have to get back to the committee. I have to get back to you. To which Nancy Mace, a South Carolina Republican, said, "That's a no. You're full of shit today." I mean, what Cheetle had said was the dog ate my homework school of excuse making. But she's the director of the Secret Service tasked with keeping alive and well the President of the United States of America and indeed the candidates for the upcoming election. Although apparently Bobby Kennedy Jr. doesn't qualify for that protection. But now, before anyone suggests that I'm making light of the assassination attempt, during which an innocent man died and other people were seriously hurt, I'm not making light of what happened, what was attempted. What I'm saying is, look at what we're offered in the aftermath of events of huge import. The director of the Secret Service of the United States of America being told in public that she's full of shit. That's incredible. That's a joke. She's a joke. And in effect, she's made a joke of her job. And at some level, we owe it to ourselves to laugh at these people, I would say. And it's the same all over. Look at what we've seen so far in the run-up to the US presidential elections. And it's only July. It's not until November. We've got months of this still to go. Anything could happen in the next 5 minutes, and probably will. I'm reminded of the Spitting Image skit. Spitting Image was a long-running comedy show in Britain. God, it might have been the 80s. I don't really remember. And it was puppets of famous people and presidents and prime ministers and so on. And there was one memorable skit within that long-running series in which Ronald Reagan featured, and it was called "The President's Brain is Missing." And it was played that he was using the inside of his own head for keeping ice cubes. His brain being absent. And for years now, though, in the real world, the US has had a senile president. Now, there's nothing funny about senility or Alzheimer's disease. Not really, not for people involved with it. But when the most powerful country in the world is run by a senile old man with his finger on the nuclear trigger, well, at some level, you just have to laugh. For months, there have been jokes about him soiling himself in front of the Pope during the D-Day commemorations all over the place. How can the United States have come to this, where the wider world, rightly or wrongly, is joking that their commander-in-chief is incontinent? You definitely as well have to laugh at how the mainstream media spent all those years, up until last week, 5 minutes ago, banging on about how sharp Joe Biden was, how this was the best version of Joe Biden. Safe pair of hands. The bonkers denial of the absence of the president's cognitive ability went all the way up to Barack Obama. Amongst other things, he tweeted after that disastrous debate performance between Trump and Biden, words that went along the lines of, well, anyone can have a bad night. Seriously, that's your best shot. The commander-in-chief, the most powerful man in the world, had a bad night. And then, all at once, it was over for Joe. Suddenly, all those who'd said he was as bright as a button, sharp as a tack, suddenly they all noticed at the same time that Biden was done. He's not fit for purpose, ready only to be consigned to yesterday. And now the anchors and others are crying crocodile tears about the man they love with all their hearts, but it's time for him to go for the good of the country and the good of the party. And it begs the question, if he's not fit to run for president, how can he still be president? How can those two facts be alongside one another? If he can't run, then he can't run the country. Surely he needs a rest home now, not the Oval Office. And the mainstream media hysteria is about everything, everywhere, all the time. It's inescapable. You can't get away from it. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow recently warned the world to beware Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel, entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and all-round Svengali, apparently, on the grounds that he names products after things in the Lord of the Rings books. This is on the news. I mean, seriously, because he seems to take some sort of inspiration from the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, that makes him, in Maddow's eyes at least, nothing less than a white supremacist. She gets from the Lord of the Rings to white supremacist with nothing in between. I mean, there might be many reasons to keep an eye on Peter Thiel and others like him. Peter Thiel is the man behind the prying, spying, intelligence-gathering company that is Palantir. That's one of the things named after something in the Lord of the Rings. You could keep an eye on the influence his money brings, and there's plenty like that. But his apparent affection for one of the most popular book series of all time, that's not a reason to keep an eye on him, not in any sane world. Rachel Maddow is a journalist, notionally at least, tasked with keeping the American public up to date with current events. It's ludicrous, it's laughable. And have you seen Vice President Kamala Harris reciting her impenetrable wisdom? That line about what can be, unburdened by what has been. It complete with semaphore hand gestures. Unburdened by what has been happening. Someone must have told her, or maybe she decided for herself that it was the most profound statement for our times. And by God, she stuck with it. There's videos online, montages showing her repeating it every chance she gets. And what does it even mean? What can be, unburdened by what has been. It makes me think of that, what Tweedledee says at one point in Through the Looking Glass. If it was so, it might be, and if it were so, it would be. But as it isn't, it ain't. That's logic. I mean, that's just And so is just about every line that comes out of the mouth of Kamala Harris. And she's a heartbeat away from being the most powerful person in the world. The nonsense is all around us. In France, hardly a soul voted for Emmanuel Macron, but he's still the president, strutting around in his high-heeled shoes. In Germany, there's another international joke in the form of Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Another titchy tiny wee man in built-up shoes. And then there's poor old Britain. Poor old Britain. The biggest joke, of course, is the fact that as things stand, I would say there's no such place as Britain, which would be funny in itself if it wasn't tragic. There's a familiar bit of dry land off the coast of Europe, but Britain is long gone. Nothing meaningful is left of the place in which I grew up. The Britain that I grew up in has been crumpled up and flung in the bin by clowns, unfunny clowns. Or unintentionally funny. The latest joke is the new Labour government led by Keir Starmer, Sir Keir Starmer, who, when he was Director of Public Prosecutions, managed to miss the most notorious paedophile in world history in the form of Jimmy Savile. No matter how many times it was brought to the attention of the Public Prosecutions Office. And how we laughed, or we should have laughed, when Starmer was handed the keys to number 10 Downing Street by King Charles, whose great chum and mentor was Jimmy Savile. The King's brother, Prince Andrew, was great pals with a contender for the world's most famous paedophile, being Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, I ask you, for one brother to enjoy the company of a man who's a world-class paedophile might be regarded as bad luck, but two brothers in the same family, what's going on? They are laughing at us. And so I try and remind myself it's high time we laughed at them. But back to that Labour government that's already giving us more comedy material than a person might know what to do with. Ed Miliband, for one. Ed Miliband, who used to be leader of that party. He's now something or other in charge of renewable energy. This is a man who can't eat a sandwich on his own. Remember when he had his election pledges carved into an enormous slab of stone, a sort of gravestone to be raised over the hole into which his credibility might have been flung then? These people are hilarious. Back from that grave, he's now, as hard as he can go, seeing to the smothering of as many acres of farmland as possible beneath solar panels and more of his favourite gigantic plastic windmills. He's consigning Britain, well, the anonymous place that used to be Britain, to a new dark age. In fact, a cold and dark age. He's fully signed up to Agenda 2030, which is nothing less than a plan for the premeditated murder of around half the population of planet Earth. And yet he continues to labour, no pun intended, under the misapprehension that anyone takes him remotely seriously. The laughable nature of these cartoon baddies, these sock puppets, means it's no surprise that the most effective hatchet job is being done on their combined antics, not by journalists, but by people who are first and foremost comedians. Jimmy Dore, Russell Brand, and a slew of others have long since realised the baddies are an infinite mine of material, a gift that keeps on giving. Despite what they're doing, it's impossible to miss the fact that their po-faced posturing, their utterly misguided sense that they're impressing anyone, their absolute determination to get their own way is In a dark way, sure enough, pure comedy. As well as using 1984 and Brave New World as instruction manuals, as well as taking their inspiration from cartoon baddies and Bond villains, as well as making sure as many tiny little men as possible are front and centre, as well as having talk of war and conscription come out of the mouths of men who look like they've been coddled, spoiled and babied their whole lives, having never done a physical job in their lives, far less risked their lives in defence of anything. Those who would dominate and control every aspect of our lives either think we haven't noticed, or else they know we've noticed and they're so bloated with misplaced self-confidence they think they're going to get their way anyway. And that, the sheer unmissable hubris of their antics, could be and should be hilarious. Maybe we're looking at the end of the world right enough, but we're being driven towards the abyss by the most ridiculously unimpressive lineup of walking, talking, living jokes the world has yet seen. I tell you, if we're going to go down, at least we could die laughing.